Welcome into the Daily Wolves podcast. I'm your host, Evan. I'm with Matt here, my co-host, and usually Andrew's joining us. But today we're running it us two, man. It's kind of like the other day. I feel like we flip-flopped. We had Andrew on for those like listening, coming back. Now we're flopping to you. Maybe next week we'll have, maybe Tim Conley in here or Mark Laurie or something like that. Who knows? You just never know, right? But yeah, welcome. This is the Daily Wolves Courtside. We're excited to bring fans that new aspect, and we're kind of go over today what happened in the game last night, because obviously they faced the Utah Jazz. The Jazz are not a great team. They're actively tanking, and Minnesota actively does another dumb thing, and they lose to another bad team. I feel like all year we've seen it constantly happening. It's nothing new to Minnesota Timberwolves fans. It's kind of why we feel more confident going to a game against like the Thunder than maybe going into the game against the Jazz, which is crazy, man. Like it's such a weird feeling. I know when people like respond to our comments on X, they always bring that stuff up too. Like if it's a good team, we'll show up. If it's a bad team, like we're more worried, and everybody feels that angst, man. Obviously they lose the game yesterday by 1, and there's a big hole in there. Why maybe like it could have been flip-flopped, I guess, where the Timberwolves are winning by 1 or more, and that's because I think one of the players was out for the Minnesota Timberwolves. That's Anthony Edwards, who served his 1-game suspension yesterday. And I think, he lost control of his emotions. It's frustrating as a Wolves fan. A lot of people were responding on our post saying that obviously we should have won without Ant. I agree with that, but they didn't. And it is like you got to think if you add in a guy who's averaging 27 a game, Matt, that could have changed the game. And even if it's that by like 2 points, right? That 2 points gets you the W last night, right?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And then especially, dude, you lose your top 10 player in the league, your first team all NBA caliber player. Like it's not like you're losing a Mike Conley, or I'm not trying to disrespect our end of rotation guys, by the way, but like a Jalen Clark or a Rob Dillingham, like you lose the guy, the face of the NBA. And it's frustrating to see, like you said, because he's such a charismatic, great guy with so much skill. Everybody wants to watch Anthony Edwards. Like it's not like we want to go watch, I don't know, like Jokic. We want to go, like people want to watch Anthony Edwards play basketball, man. And when Anthony Edwards doesn't play, that does something to your team. You don't pull in as many viewers. Obviously, your team isn't full with like the highlight caliber plays or whatever you want to say. But he's definitely got to get his emotions in check, man. After I want to say it was his 12th or 11th technical earlier this year, he came out and said, I have to be better. I'm not going to get any more technicals. And sorry about that. There's the cat. But he came out and said, I'm not going to get any more technicals. And what does he do? The game after racks up another tech. 2 games following, another tech. And here we are. He's leading the NBA with 17 technical fouls. And it's to the point where I'm like, he's going to get suspended again. He can't hold his emotions. Like, and if he doesn't, great. That would be awesome. But I would be thoroughly surprised if Ant didn't come out and get more techs to follow. And I believe what the rule is in the NBA is after you face your first suspension, after your 16-game technical, you get 2 techs per, and then it's another game suspension. So Ant he's at 17 now. If he gets tech 18 and 19, he faces another suspension. And then after that following 20 and 21, another suspension. So it's one of those things. Yeah, you're young, dude, but you're the leader. It's something that's got to change. I feel like a little bit, it's kind of carrying off into some of our other players a little bit. And the first example I think of is Naz Reid. I feel like I've seen Naz complain a little bit more than he used to in years past, especially on call or when he's taking it to the rim. I feel like that's kind of just a big example is Naz Reid. And I feel like, like if my, we'll say boss or the person that I was looking up to is doing that, I'd be like, that's okay to act like that and stuff like that. So Ant's got to be better. That's definitely, it's kind of what happens, you don't have your best player. It's kind of what you have to track it back and can track it back to versus we win this game. It's, hey, we can win without Anthony Edwards, but it's kind of now like you have Ant, it's different. And now the finger gets pointed at Ant. And also, while I got the mic, Andrew, welcome in. A little bit late. We were just kind of discussing no Anthony Edwards. the technicals, got to get that under control. But yeah, just to fill you in, I'll pass it back to you, Evan.
I think last night people saw my post, and I was obviously pretty upset about Ant not playing. And that's, again, I just feel like when you're a superstar player, like you said, Matt, when they look up to you, I know he's still young, 23 years old, but he's been in the league for 5 years. At this point, you're kind of a vet, right? And like TJ's older than Ant as an example, but TJ's a rookie and he still looks up to Ant, right? And you knew when Karl Anthony Towns left, the keys were in your court. You were the franchise player. Everybody knew it. People are in your camp are telling you it. The NBA is telling you that you're the face of the league. You're getting all this attention. You were on Team USA. Now you know that you're in the big dog's house and you have to step up. And it's just one of those things that you can't, like, you have to realize all eyes are on you. Yes, it rubs off when you miss games. When you do these things, it messes with your players. It has to in the locker room just a little bit. It's just frustrating for the guys, and yeah, obviously they could have used him last night. So going forward, like you said, he's definitely gonna. We know Ant. We love him for being authentic, but control it a little bit more. He's probably gonna miss another game or so, maybe 2, because there's just too many games left, and Ant just loves to, get his. I think he has a valid, argument too for a lot of the arguments, right? Because he does get hit a lot and more than a lot of people, and because he's like 215 or whatever he weighs, or just huge, like linebacker, basically. I think he doesn't get a lot of the calls. Like SGA is just a smaller, wiry guy. I mean, of course he's going to get calls compared to Ant, right? So it's kind of one of those things that Ant kind of like he has so much force and burst that I feel like he just doesn't get a lot of calls, even though he should. So I understand where his frustration is for sure. Just is what it is. But yeah, I think Mike Conley. Let's kind of go into Mike Conley because I know Andrew here. He loves Mike. Mike's been playing good recently. Matt, I know before we were on here, we had talked a little bit about Mike and his struggles. So we're kind of like, this is a good thing to bring you in on, Andrew, because I feel like we have two different sides of Mike's been really good, and then Mike is, Matt doesn't love Mike's play so much. So I'll toss it over to you, Andrew. Let's go to the positives first about Mike Conley because last night he had a rough game. I don't know what your thoughts are about Conley's game last night.
It's tough, right? He's not the same player he was last year or the majority of his career. Like he's able to hit that kind of hide behind the screen, pull up 3 shot anymore. He's really struggling with just kind of basic burst getting to the rim. I think if you're looking at positives with Mike Conley, he's, really over the last 15 games, he's still a 40% 3-point shooter. He's more of a spot up 3-point shooter above the break now than probably the pick and roll type 3-point shooter where he just launches them. And he still has certain plays he can go to. Like when he's playing with Rudy Gobert, that pick and roll where he comes off a pick and roll with Rudy and he does that like weird floater lob, defenses really don't know which one is coming type of thing, is still like statistically one of the most effective things the Wolves run. I think outside of that though, he's kind of what he is offensively. And that's where this team gets into a lot of trouble, because when there isn't an Ant out there that can create his own shot, Mike just can't run an offense the same way. And we saw it last night where teams were able to single cover Mike and kind of just shut him down. And there wasn't that extra attention on an Anthony Edwards, or there wasn't the extra attention on Randle in the paint, or even Rudy on the lob. He wasn't there. So what do you do if you're Mike Conley at that point? You're kind of just rendered, ineffective. Defensively, he's been fine. Like, I do think beginning of the season, he just didn't have his legs under him, whether he wasn't able to do his off-season workout or whatever. He's been fine, but like last night, for example, he shouldn't have finished that game. Like, I don't know why.
Yeah, 100%.
TJ wasn't in there, Clark wasn't in there, Rob wasn't in there. He shouldn't have finished it. Like, we saw enough through the first 3 quarters to see, like, oh, Mike really can't play without Ant.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think on the topic of Mike not being able to play without Ant, I think that adding Rudy into that, like you kind of said earlier, Andrew, just getting that like that pick and roll, they've had that chemistry built up for years, and I think that definitely does affect Mike's play as well. And that's kind of something that I've tried to keep in the back of my head too, because Evan, like you said, Mike Conley's play a little bit recently is kind of not necessarily frustrated me, but I've kind of turned my head a little bit here and there. And I think the only part that I kind of disagree with you on, Andrew, is Mike's defensive play as of lately. He's done good for what he can, but it's just the fact that teams go out and they single out Mike Conley every single time he's on the floor. Like, especially in a situation like the main thing that comes to my head is the Houston game. Why do we have 37-year-old Mike Conley guarding a 22-year-old most athletic player in the league, Amen Thompson? And like I understand that like that's it comes within the game. You can't control that. It comes within game flow. But just kind of looking back at recent games, like I look at the OKC game, you get singled out by J-Dub. The Milwaukee game, I recall him guarding Kyle Kuzma a few times, if I remember correct. Or maybe it was a few games prior, but Mike is just a defensive liability at this point in his career. On ball for what it is, he's good. Pound for pound, he's 37 years old. Father time catches up to everybody but LeBron. Yeah. It is what it is. But off ball, man, Mike just he's lost a step, and it is what it is. And to kind of bring it back to cover a few more points that both of you guys touched on, Mike is what he is on offense, and you said, and that's cool with me. I know what I'm going to get from Mike Conley. I know I'm going to get the 40% 3-point shooting. I know he's going to be able to at least set his guys up and get the offense started. But last night specifically, like you said, like why was Rob Dillingham not out there? And then in the OKC game, like Rob Dillingham, Terrence Shannon, Jalen Clark, the young guys are on the floor. They're running. They're like, when it's in the fourth quarter, the older guys are tired. You got fresh legs. You got young guys who don't have as many miles on their tires. So I don't think it's a coincidence that these young guys have played so excellent over the last 2-3 games. I would say I didn't watch the LA game too in depth, but I saw the comeback when it was like Shannon, Clark, Dillingham, like those guys. So I feel like we're kind of to the point in the season where we're fighting for a play-in spot at this point. The 6 through 11 race is very, very close. Why not like mix it up a little bit? What we got going isn't working, and we find ourselves stuck in these clutch opportunities. Like it is literally the exact opposite of what our team was last year. Like last year, we were the elite closing team. Like if we were down going into the third or in the fourth, like I was always like, it's all right. We're a second half team. We're going to win it. But last night I'm watching the game, and before we're down, like I'm sitting there, I'm like, I've seen this movie too many times. I know what's going to happen. And sure as shit, unfortunately, maybe we could have, we just lost the game flat out. I'm kind of rambling a little bit now, but yeah, I just think some changes need to be made with who closes the games, just maybe certain players at certain times. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. This episode is sponsored by Head Flyer Brewing. For those that live or are visiting the Minneapolis area and are looking for a great place to sit down, watch some sports, have a beer, and great pizza, Head Flyer is the place for you. Located in Northeast Minneapolis, Head Flyer Brewing is the place for my beer connoisseurs. With more than 13 flavors of their own brew, all freshly made on Head Flyer's tap room right on campus. For my folks who tend to lean more green, Head Flyer also provides their own crafted seltzer cocktails and THC seltzers. Head Flyer is also partnered with the new national phenomenon, OG Zaza Pizza Truck, which just recently had their own episode aired on the Food Network. OG Zaza provides the best New Haven-style pizza that I have ever tried, with flavors ranging from pepperoni to garlic parm blends to foot-long breadsticks and so much more. Come on out to Head Flyer Brewing, located at 861 East Hennepin Avenue, Suite 100 in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
I mean, you got to think when Dante gets back into the starting lineup, it could really change everything when he's back in the starting point guard position. And we're just hoping that happens very soon, right? Because I think that changes a lot of the dynamics here we're talking about. Obviously, Julius Randle coming back here soon. But you don't have any margin for error. And that's the problem right now. We just don't. We messed around at the beginning of the year. They didn't take certain things serious. They're the worst, one of the worst clutch teams in the NBA. They have all these problems closing games. And now you're having players that are getting suspensions. And you need to be winning games, right? If you didn't have all this pressure on you and you took care of business, it's not as big of a deal, right? Those things all matter. it's kind of a learning experience, hopefully for the guys, because I mean, at this point, they shouldn't really have this problem anyway. This was a thing when we were that team a few years back, and then they like couldn't close games with like Vando and that team. And then last year we saw them take that leap of becoming consistent. They were the closer. They were that good team. They looked like they matured. They looked like they're going to be good. So to take a step back from last year makes me question a lot of things. Makes me question, like, is Kyle Anderson that big in the locker room? Was Karl Anthony Towns that big in the locker room? I don't know. But it's like, I'm just looking around like we need an adults in the room. We need a guy who's a veteran coming out there. And I shouldn't say that when guys are in this far into their career. It's just, we just shouldn't be talking. This shouldn't be a conversation. It just shouldn't be. I mean, yesterday I saw what the Jazz were running out there, like their lineup. I mean, they were literally like begging for you to take the game over. I mean, it was ridiculous. Like, it's just ridiculous. And it's just, I don't get it. I don't know why the guys don't want to grasp it. There was that in the third quarter. What was it, like 27-4 run? What are you doing against the Jazz, right, guys? What are you doing? And that's an issue that this team has. They got a lot of stuff to clean up. And I look at this roster and it's exciting. The young guys are there. It's an exciting roster. They got a lot of talent. But to me, and I saw it last night, it's just how I feel. Every time there's a game like this, and it's not just this game, it's been this season, right? This is why I still think the Wolves go out. They're going to do something this summer. This is why people, they hate it. They hate that I say that. They hate that Kevin Durant's in a conversation. Not saying that it is going to be Durant, but this is why I believe that this roster, they're looking at it and they're smart. They realize this just isn't it. We're going to be kind of doing the same thing next year in a way. Anthony Edwards, he needs it's clear as day to me. I don't know about what you guys think, but he needs a number 2 next to him of some star caliber, sort. Not Randle. He needs to be a bona fide star. It doesn't have to be like a top 10, but he needs somebody to take the pressure off him because he got loaded up. We saw it against the LA game, just like loaded up on Ant. It's frustrating for him. And I think like the whole team, they miss Cat so much. What do you think, Andrew?
Yeah, before I touch on like the team, I do want to just touch really quick on just Mike Conley and something Matt said, because Rob Dillingham gets a lot of the like, if you're online, if you're on Twitter, if you're on Facebook, it's the Rob Dillingham needs to play. Why aren't we playing Rob more? And Rob does bring that burst and excitement. Rob does bring something to the offense. He can find his own shot. That's true. But defensively speaking, you can pull up, stats of players when they get mismatched onto different positions. So just for example, Mike Conley, who's having a down defensive season, he spent 70% of his matchups on guards, 27% on forwards. You look at the shooting percentage against, he shoots 44%. Guards shoot 44% against him. Forwards shoot 45%. Guards shoot almost 40% from 3. That's an issue. Forwards shoot 28% from 3. So essentially kind of the same. Guards shoot better from 3, but there's not really a drop off when there's a positional mismatch. Obviously, like when Mike Conley gets switched on Jason Tatum, he gets cooked, but most people do.
Yeah.
If you switch over to Rob Dillingham, when he's matched up against forwards, they shoot 58% from the field and 40% from 3. When he's matched up against guards, they shoot 36% and 31%. So there is truth that Rob, when he is matched up against on a guard, it goes well. The issue with Rob is it's instant points if he gets matched up on a forward. And I think if we're looking at why Rob isn't playing right now, it's because anyone over 6'6" can score on him at will. And it's not Rob's fault. I will say he works his ass off on defense. He is active. He's bodying. He's just too small right now. So when we're looking at like who can replace Conley, Evan, you're 100% right. It's Dante. Like this team, when Julius comes back, I don't think Mike closes anymore. I think it's Dante. I think it's Ant, 100%. Jaden, Julius, and then Nas or Gobert. Like I think that's the natural fix there. What's frustrating with this team on like a maturity level is, again, you look at like their record against bad teams this year, and they're terrible. Like they're sitting around 500 against teams that have a sub 500 record. And it's, we've talked to Chris Finch about it, and it's how do you motivate these guys to come out and play against a bad team? And it's very, at this point in the season, it's probably not going to change. Things don't really change in March. They usually change in December and January. I wish I had an answer for what can be different. I'll say like Kyle Anderson's leadership definitely is missed. Towns, I don't know if it's, to the point where like national media is starting to talk about it, like Ant's missing him a ton, because like Towns also is kind of a culprit of this. In 22-23, there was a lot of Towns games where he didn't wake up for. Throughout his entire career, there's been a lot of games Towns didn't wake up for. I think when we're looking at, to answer the last question really quickly, when we're looking at what this team's going to do in the offseason, I think if I had like $100,000 to bet in Vegas, I would bet that they're going to make a move. They just have the Randle contract. They have expirings. It makes the most sense that they're going to take a swing at something. That being said, like, I think 3 years from now, a Ant, Jaden, Naz core can get you pretty far, especially with Jaden scoring 20 regularly. Naz can score 20. Ant, if he's going to be a megastar. But I just don't know if they're going to wait around 3 years and just be a 4 or 5 seed every year, when they could go out and get a Durant, when they could go out and make a swing at if Trae Young's available, or I'm sure Paul George is going to be available this offseason, or just like a mid 30-year-old veteran that can still play really well.
Today's show is also brought to you by Better, the sports betting app brought to you by Jake Paul. Sign up with our code, TheDailySPN, to get a deposit match up to $200, meaning if you deposit $200, Better will match that and give you $200 in free bets. Better is currently available in 34 out of the 50 states in the U.S., including Minnesota. If you see your state in the purple, that means you are eligible to download Better and start winning money today. Me personally, I usually find myself taking Anthony Edwards over on 3-pointers made, which I'm actually taking tonight against the Thunder, along with Jalen Williams to go under 24.5 points plus assists. Again, sign up with the code TheDailySPN, all one word, to receive a $200 deposit match and start winning money today. Yeah, I actually just want to ask you something real quick, Andrew. I found myself, for kind of some more casual listeners of the Wolves, would either of you guys maybe want to break down a little bit just kind of why the Julius Randle contract is so valuable to teams, just like how that option works? Because I found myself explaining it to people here and there throughout the week on Twitter, and I feel like you guys might be able to explain that a little bit better, just like why would teams want Julius, right? Like, that is the question that Minnesota fans have asked that are more casual watchers. Like, what does Julius do? What is this? Yada, yada, yada. But yeah, why is this contract important in the move?
Yeah, I'll kick it over to you, Andrew, because you know more about swing on it. Let's hear it.
No, go ahead. Oh,
well, I was going to say that. I was getting used to the. I think
we're still getting used to the transitions.
Yeah, I think so like I'll mostly put it onto you for it, but I get a lot of questions too. It's consistently in like the comments. I get DMs about it on Instagram. I get DMs about it on X. People are confused if Matt and I post videos or reels or TikToks, like people are wondering, and everybody seems to have this collective thought that if you're going for KD, that means Jaden McDaniels or maybe like a Naz Reid are going out in the deal. And that's where Minnesota fans are so angry about this. I think that's a lot of people are instantly fast. They hear like a name, like we'll trade for somebody, and it's an instant. No, because we can't give up Jaden and Naz. That's where their mind's going. So I think people are confused because they know we're tight on the cap. They don't understand exactly, which is fine. That's why we're here to educate, hopefully help you guys. But why maybe things change up when you wait for the summer versus making a trade at the deadline, because there's things that come off, that 25% thing, which I'm sure you'll get into. Obviously the Rudy Gobert contract, which I'm sure you'll get into, which I'll leave it for you on that. But I think like those things make it so there's a lot of flexibility going into the summer. And then obviously now that Randle's on the expiring, that opens a lot of doors up for Tim Connelly. It opens doors up for the Timberwolves. I'll kind of kick it over to you, Andrew, and if you want to explain to people, because I think it'll make a lot more sense. And this guy's the best salesman in the world. He'll make you feel like, Timberwolves are gonna. It's like feasible for them to see that they could go out and they could go big game hunting if they really wanted to.
So yeah, Julius Randle. I mean, in trading for him, getting rid of Karl Anthony Towns, they saved like $11 million in that deal. Like they got Keita Bates, they cut him. That was kind of the main part of that deal. Hey, let's shed a little bit of money and let's make it more flexible long term. And that's where Randle comes in. He's an expiring contract next year. It's probably like a 50-50 coin flip on if he accepts it. I'm kind of in the camp that thinks that there might be a market this offseason that's going to offer to pay him, and that might force the Wolves' hand in it. But Randle as an asset, his true value is less about like his scoring, and it's a lot more about that player option of $31 million next season. And that's kind of counterintuitive because if you're watching sports shows, if you're listening to certain people on the radio, you see, oh my gosh, if Julius Randle opts in, that's $31 million that we can't pay Naz Reid. That's $31 million that's just wasted. But it's really not. If Randle doesn't opt in, that money is just gone. For example, in 25-26, they're going to be, let's see here. They're going to be, scroll down a little faster, Andrew. They're going to be over the cap just off rip. And what that means is they can't really use any of that money to sign players. Project Naz Reid were to opt out, the Wolves would have $10 million in the cap room if every player on the team opted out. That's Luka. That's Josh Minot. That's turning down Leonard Miller's team option. Everyone opts out. They have $10 million. That's all they can spend. $10 million. Yep. You cannot go over the cap to sign free agents, period. So it's not like Randle opts out, Reid opts out, and they just have this swath of money. If they all opt in, meaning Randle opts in, Reid, we re-sign him and everything like that, it puts they would have $3 million in space if everybody apron represent. What that means is you get certain penalties, but all of the penalties associated with like the second apron. So for example, if you're in the first apron, you can only trade 110% of your salary versus like if you make a trade, you can only take 110 pennies back on the dollar. If you were in just over the cap and not in the first apron, you can take $1.25 back on $1 in a trade. So this is what pathetically kind of happens. So Naz Reid opts out, Randle opts in, let's say Minot, all of those other guys opt in. And just like that, they would be over the cap, meaning they could not sign anyone, which if Randle opted out, they wouldn't be able to sign anyone anyways, but they would be in the hard cap and not the first apron. What that opens up for this team is that they could use Randle's $31 million and they could trade for a $40 million player because they can take 125 back on. That means if they were to go after a Kevin Durant, for example, they would only have to hit about $41 million total outgoing salary to get Kevin Durant's $54 million to come in. It means if they were to go after Trae Young, they only need about $35 million outgoing salary instead of matching it. That's where Randle's contract off a Kevin Durant trade, it's Jaden. It's probably only Jaden because Rudy doesn't have value. So there is a world where if the Wolves do things in a specific order, because it's not like the NBA looks at this and it's a video game and you make all of these moves and it says incorrect, none of them work. It's all about order in the offseason. So if the Wolves waited until the NBA draft, Randle opts into his contract, they could make their first round draft pick. They could make their second round draft pick. They could make another second round draft pick. They could do Randle, whoever they picked in the first round, whoever they picked in the second round with the Detroit pick in their own seconds and send that off to Phoenix and get Kevin Durant back. To make the money work, you could ship off Josh Minot to a third team, Leonard Miller to a third team, Garza to a third team, what have you. But there's a world where you could make that trade. Now, why would Phoenix do it? Phoenix is in true cap like hell. Like, we think we're in a bad situation with the cap. Phoenix, between Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, and Grayson Allen, have $4 million until they hit the second apron. That means in the first apron, they would not be able to sign anyone for over $4 million. And then once they hit the second apron, everybody's a veteran minimum, which try and round out a roster with 11 veteran minimum players, Kevin Durant, the corpse of Bradley Beal, and Devin Booker. Like, they aren't making the playoffs this year. That's awful. So if Kevin Durant, again, in a world where he says, I need out of here, I only want to go to Minnesota, there's a world where Minnesota says, here's your medicine, swallow it. You're getting Julius Randle, the Detroit pick, a couple seconds. That's it. And for Phoenix, they would look at that of, we're freeing up $11 million to where now we can spread out, get a couple mid-level exception guys, maybe do a sign and trade and get somebody in. And that's kind of what they'd have to do. Because if Durant's saying, I'm not going to play if I go to Orlando, why would Orlando offer anything? The next step with that, and it gets a little bit more complicated, is, you get Kevin Durant in, you're still in the first apron at that point. Nas is sitting out floating in free agency. Nikhil's sitting out floating in free agency. Because you're in the first apron, you could sign like a $6 million mid-level exemption player. That guy signs, say, like Bobby Portis on a, steal of a deal, wants to come back here. Then you could sign Nikhil and Nas, because cap rules dictate that you can go over the second apron to sign your own players. That's the only way you can get into the second apron, is signing your own players. So you sign Nas to a $30 million a year, 4-year deal. You sign Nikhil to a 2-year, $40 million deal, and you blow past the second apron. Again, that's where this gets weird, because the new CBA, if you're in the second apron 2 out of 5 years, all that happens is 2 of your picks 7 years out get frozen. If you're in the second apron 3 out of the 5 years, every one of your first round picks 7 years out gets kicked to the end of the first round until you have been out of the second apron 3 consecutive seasons. Next year would be year number 2. So theoretically, this team could have their cake and eat it too. Get Kevin Durant for a Julius Randle package, re-sign Nas, re-sign Nikhil, have a super loaded team. And then next year, when Kevin Durant's $54 million comes off, Mike Conley's $11 million comes off, they slip back under the second apron, and they are able to just kind of team build as normal. That's kind of the conspiracy theory that I have. I think it works. I think what's interesting with that is it all relies on Kevin Durant. He needs to say, I will only play in Minnesota for that to work. Because if he
what if he comes out and says, I want to play, or I want to be traded, let's say, but then he doesn't say Minnesota. Let's just say it's like 3 or 4 teams. Minnesota's in there. Let's just say it's like 4 teams. Then what happens? We just don't get him, right?
Yeah. I truly think the Wolves have Nas, Jaden, and Edwards as untouchables. I think what McDaniels has done over the last 5-10 games is proof point that he's going to be great someday. Nas is a cult figure in Minnesota. He's so important to the chemistry of this team. And Ant, obviously, they turned down a Luka trade for him, so he's untouchable. I think when you're like, if it is not Kevin Durant, either publicly or behind closed doors, saying, I am only going to Minnesota, almost every other team in the league has more ammo. Houston has more ammo. Oklahoma City has more ammo. Atlanta, Orlando. And unless the Wolves are willing to throw in like Nas Reed on a sign and trade with Randall and picks, they're not going to be able to compete for him.
Yeah. No, I get that.
Yeah, this is the exact reason that you explained it, because I love basketball and I understand basketball, but I was sitting here just like, what, man? So thank you for that, Andrew. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's the new CBA. I've written 3 pieces on it because it is so confusing and doesn't make any sense, and it's frustrating to fans because now 2K doesn't match reality, right? In NBA 2K, you can't trade injured players. In reality, you can now. In NBA 2K, there isn't a second apron. In reality, there is now. And what I've found over my career is when 2K doesn't match reality, confusion happens.
Right.
100%. Yeah, but it's good you brought it up. It's good to get it out to people wondering, and hopefully if anyone has more questions, they can hit up Andrew. His X is up on the screen there, so definitely give him a follow. We're on TikTok, we're on Instagram, we're on there as well. We appreciate all the following. This is the Daily Wolves Courtside. We're gonna wrap it up here, but thanks for joining in. We'll have another episode coming up this week. Always look for us after games, and as always, guys, go Wolves.